MCM studios in the high school in Marshfield, Massachusetts. This is control room for December 11, 2024. And yes, indeed, it is quite a tempest out there tonight. A lot of stuff blowing around, but the power is still on and we're still here. And we have a couple of guests tonight. And the main topic of our conversation tonight, I think it's going to be MBTA zoning, also known as Chapter 40A, Section 3A. For those of you who want to go online and look up the Massachusetts statutes, I would highly encourage you to do it. At least somebody in town will be reading the law, because most of our officials are not. All right, so go to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 3A. It's called the Multifamily Zoning as of Right in MBTA Communities. That's a mouthful act. And you're going to find out what all this controversy is about. And there it is on, just like that, by magic, there it is on the screen. Read along with me. An MBTA community shall have a zoning ordinance or bylaw that provides for at least one district of reasonable size. And pay attention to the wording here, okay? Pay attention to the wording. The wording is, I've always felt when you're trying to follow along with regulations and interpret them, it's almost intentionally vague. And you know what that does is that for the next 20 or 30 years, whatever law gets adopted and put on the books, it becomes like a pendulum. In other words, you'll have rulings in court that swing one way with one interpretation and swing another way with another interpretation, etc. And this is the kind of thing that you're going to be asked to adopt at Marshfield Town Meeting next Monday night, December 16th, and which 177 other communities in eastern Massachusetts are trying to deal with right now. Those are the so-called MBTA communities. This stuff is being rammed down our throats. We're being told that that this has to be adopted, that we have to vote the right way. Now, zoning laws like this have to be accepted and adopted by the individual cities and towns. They don't just automatically apply to everybody. This is a case where they have to be adopted by the cities and towns. And what we're being told is that if we don't adopt this bylaw into our own zoning bylaws, then we're going to be penalized. We're going to be sued. We're going to have state grant money withheld from us. But let's go back to the language of the law real quick, if we might. Can we get the slide? Can we get the slide back up? There it is. Okay. So what this is saying is that the communities, again, these are MBTA service communities, and it's debatable whether or not Marshfield is even an MBTA service community, because we don't have MBTA services here. But we're being told you better adopt a district of reasonable size, whatever that means, okay, in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right. That means if I want to build a multifamily unit in Marshfield right now, we have zoning laws. We have residential 1, residential 2, business 3, business, residential 3, et cetera. And each residence has its own sets of allowances and restrictions. This is saying you need to adopt a big district, a big parcel, where you can just go in and say to the town, I want to build multifamily housing. It's going to be family housing, and there's going to be no age restriction on it. And we're being told to adopt this, and if we don't, we're in trouble. And so right now the game is that there is a whole list. Initially when this law was passed, there were, I think, 3 or 4 grant programs that the state administered that were going to be subject to withholding if a community did not adopt this regulation. Now, because so many cities and towns were saying, no way, this is going to ruin our towns, change the character of our towns. In a case like, I think, Halifax, it has the potential to create a 25% increase in the population if you were to get these units built and populated and filled in. In Marshfield, over 1,000 units are the potential. And one thing that the officials will not tell you is what it's going to cost the town, not just aesthetically, but also financially, to support this type of an influx. What is the demand on services going to become? And there you see for Marshfield the proposed outlay is along Plain Street from about the high school, which you see on the right side of your screen. That's the high school complex. All the way over to the left where you see that diagonal red line which corresponds to School Street. And that bright white roof building in the middle of the zone that's in crosshatch is Quirk Auto Dealership. So there's a lot of parcels. Also we have a map of the district. And I haven't counted up the actual number of lots, but there's, well, you can actually see the lots line if you look carefully at that map. But there's, 30 or 40 lots within that district right there. And within that district, and there's a view of it from a bird's eye view. And it starts off to the district, there's the high school in the top center. And down in the lower left part of your screen right now, I think that is the dark roof on the left, I think, is Blanchard's Liquors. And the small building in the center right now is the dry cleaner. And as you pan over, you can see, I think that's Fox Run in the back, away from the road. And then that building in the middle right there is where the pizza place is, and is that 7-Eleven? Yep. 7-Eleven right there, that little strip mall there. And then there's the Stiles building, I believe, and there's another strip mall, and again, apartments behind that. Then there's the Quirk dealership. So you can see what's there. On the left side of the screen is the PMUD, the Planned Mixed Use Development, which is where Roach Brothers is, and where we have one currently active 40B project development, which is like 275 units. This phase 2 of the 40B development behind Roach Brothers is under construction. That's over 200 units again on top of that. So basically, what you're looking at is, in addition to the two big 40B projects that are recently have gone in up behind Roach Brothers, you're looking at the potential for another 3 or 4 similarly sized, the equivalent of 3 or 4 similarly sized projects that could go into this district. And that's a lot to try to digest. I'm throwing a lot at you all at once, but this is where they want to zone it so that if you want to build multifamily housing, you will be allowed to build multi-unit family housing 4 stories high, 16 units per acre. And the potential there is over 1,000 units. And that's where we're going to start right now. One thing I want to point out to you is that they always say there's going to be restrictions on areas like this. Like in a different zone, you're allowed to build, you have certain setbacks, you have height restrictions, you have density requirements, you have yard space requirements in a residential zone. And very often in this town, our zoning board gives out special permits and variances like candy. So they're going to tell you, oh, don't worry. There's so many buildings there now, not everybody's going to sell out and want to build multi-unit family housing. But over a period of time, and as you know, when you get old, you begin to see decades go by fast, all right? They say, oh, don't worry, it won't build out for 20 or 30 years. Well, that's what we're going to leave our kids with. But going back to the point I'm trying to make is that very often when a builder wants to do something and they say, you know, we really, like when they did the assisted living facility over by Roach Brothers, they said it was going to be a 3-story building. But then they came back to the proponent came back and said, no, we're not going to make enough of a profit. We need another story on that building. And it would require a variance, and they got it. And what's the only thing holding back the granting of variances? Challenges by the neighbors. The neighbors have to challenge, abutters have to challenge these things in order to keep them reined in and under control. In an area like this, guess what? You're not going to have abutters. You're not going to have residences with people that are upset about a 4 or 5 or 6-story building going in their backyard. This island, this block, is basically going to probably be, in my opinion, from what I've seen, is probably going to be immune from any challenges from abutters. So they're going to tell you, don't worry, it's 4 stories, don't worry, it's only 16 units an acre. But what actually happens is anybody's guess. And it's my opinion, I don't want to take that chance and leave that kind of a mess to our children and our grandchildren. So that's kind of packed into a small container, what's going on with this. And you're going to be asked to vote for this at town meeting on Monday, December 16th at 7 p.m. at the high school. We shot it down in the spring because people recognized the potential gross negative impacts to the town and to Plain Street, which is tough to drive down now. Okay, you're probably talking about having to add extra lanes and traffic lights, and and we could talk about more about the impacts, and that's what we're here to do. So tonight with me, I have to my left Jackie Mason, activist. This lady is TNT. Okay, don't mess with Jackie Mason. Jackie lives on Ocean Street. She's one of the residents that has gotten super involved and super energized by what she sees happening to our town. And also we have the Christine Hill from Duxbury originally. She went on a long hiatus around the world, but now she's back in Duxbury. Christine Hill is I would guess I'd classify you as an investigative reporter.
Well, that's what I used to do in Asia, and that's what I've been doing again in Duxbury for the last couple months. My Substack, Substack.com, if anybody wants to look.
Christine has done some really in-depth reporting and investigating on a number of issues, including the schools.
I've been working on a lot of, there was a secret bridge project in Duxbury where our town manager wants to destroy the wooden bridge in Duxbury over the bay, Powder Point Bridge. So I've done on that, and a lot of zoning issues, and some sand mining in Duxbury that nobody knows about. And MBTA Communities, we had some odd group come into Duxbury called One Commonwealth that tried to influence the vote. And it turned out to be a dark money nonprofit that had been started by the governor. And we believe is funded by developers, but we're not sure. But if you here in Marshfield hear from some outside groups like One Commonwealth Group, you should know that they're there to influence the vote, and they have nothing to do with Marshfield.
So you, again, you're originally from Duxbury.
Yeah.
And you did travel quite a bit. You say you were in Asia.
Yes.
You wrote for South China News.
South China Morning Post. It's the major English language paper in Hong Kong. I was the Southeast Asian correspondent. I wrote for Business Week, and I wrote a lot for Institutional Investor magazine, and reported everywhere from Pakistan to Hong Kong.
Wow. This is really providential that you would arrive back here to do the kind of investigative reporting and digging that you're doing right now, especially at the time that we're faced with the MBTA Communities Act being rammed down our throats. This is really, this is a gift. We had a couple of great reporters. I just want to mention, some people might remember Lydia Mulvaney, who now writes for Bloomberg, as far as I know. And we had the lady that wrote for Catherine Koch, who wrote for the Marshfield Reporter. And they paid them peanuts, but they always tried to do a good job, and they tried to write about the things that were basically verboten. And I think the thing that put Lydia over the edge, Lydia Mulvaney, wherever she is, last I heard she was in Greece, then Italy, and out in the Midwest again. But she started doing reports on, believe it or not, restaurant inspections. Wow. In Marshfield. And that was it. That was like, at that point they said, no, Lydia, we're not going to be giving you a raise, and you're not ever going to be getting a raise, and so that was the end of her. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, you're not in an easy position.
It's fine for me, because what happens with the local papers is that they're advertiser supported. And so when you write anything that upsets the advertisers, they march into your paper and demand that you stop it. So you end up with a lot of local newspapers that don't really report the news the great thing about Substack is it's completely reader-supported, so you don't run into that issue.
And just so we fill in on our guests again, Jackie, what are you doing right now in Marshfield? Are you working? You have children, I understand.
Yep, I'm a mom of two, and I am a children's book author. I've illustrated and published 4 children's books, and I landscape and just advocate for everybody, and hopefully get some changes in Marshfield, because that's much.
Well,
much
and how old are your children now?
My daughter is 13 and my son is 9, so.
So they're in the system.
Yes, and my son wants to be the mayor of Marshfield someday, so I have to make this town good enough, so.
Well, you're going to have to get past Mike Maresco to do that.
Hey, it's okay. I'm up for the challenge.
So, folks, you know, beyond that, where do we start? I mean, again, we're faced with this vote on Monday. Okay, it's become clear that as the towns and cities began to reject this left and right, well, at least not pursuing it, that the state added a stick. And the stick was to expand the list of grant programs that we were told we would not be eligible for. Like, if you don't adopt this, you don't vote the right way, that's it. There is a number of grant programs, including money from what's called the Seaport Economic Council. And we can talk more about that, because recently the Seaport Economic Council voted on a list of grants to the cities and towns. Seaport Economic Council money, which is somewhere in the vicinity of $3 to $4 million a year, is spread among 78 cities and towns in Massachusetts, okay? And the only grant that Marshfield is up for right now is $261,000, which is going to be split with Situate. It's not all for Marshfield. Okay, this is a Situate Marshfield project where they need to do permitting in preparation for dredging in the North-South River confluence area. But just to give you a little lead into how something like that is being used to scare you, the town council is saying that we're now at risk of losing that $261,000 if we don't vote this through on Monday. And the first thing is, first of all, it's a joint project with the town of Situate, and secondly, I don't know how you can retroactively pull a grant away from somebody after it's already been granted, just as an example. But I want to hand it over to Christine right now, because she has done extensive writing on this subject, and she has done research into the so-called penalties that are being tacked on and wielded to coerce or force people to adopt the MBTA Act. So what do you find, Christine, in terms of how this whole act is being approached?
Okay, so I think the most important thing that everybody has to remember is that you have these grants that are actually quite small in relation to your overall budget for the year.
Our budget is like $145 million
right.
coming up.
And so they're very small. So you have, let's say you lose $300,000 in grants. What's going to happen if you have 300 families move in, and at the worst case scenario, let's say they all have 3 kids. Then you have 900 kids in your town, and I'm sorry, I didn't do the math on that particular example, I just came up. But right now you're spending about $17,000 per kid in your school. So 17,000 times 900 is going to be what, about $1.5 million in extra costs, and you're going to have these inexpensive in-district. Oh yeah, those are old figures.
Those are old figures from Marshfield.
Those are old figures. The latest figure is from 2022, and that's 16,549. And so I added, based on inflation, I rounded that up to 17,000. So you end up, that's just going to be a cost of $1.5 million. And then with your tax rate, let's say there's these are apartments and they're $400,000. And you have a tax rate that's about 1%, you're going to end up with these are making it harder for me to talk because they don't match what I'm saying at
That's
all.
okay. That's okay.
You're going to end up with only $4,000 in tax revenue. You're going to have, just for the kids in the school, $17,000 in expenses, okay? So that's $13,000 times however many kids you have, and you don't have enough money to pay for those kids. In addition to that, you have the cost. You're going to have to, if you have 300 more houses on Plain Street, you're going to have to do something to that street. Then you have your sewer costs, you have your water costs, you have the cost of the police, you have the cost of the fire department, and you have to include all of those total costs into your calculation of how much you're going to lose from these houses. I know there's one gentleman in town who thinks it's unfair if Marshfield penalizes somebody who's moving into a $400,000 apartment. But you have to be realistic about the cost, because what happens is when you don't have enough money to pay for things, you either reduce the amount of services you're providing, or you have to have a Proposition 2.5 override. And when you have the Proposition 2.5 override, it raises everybody's taxes. So all the people whose budgets are just on the edge, like they're suffering, they're working 3 jobs, they may be retired, they may have a pension, they have to sell their houses because they can't afford it. Like my grandmother, fortunately she had some property she eventually sold, but before she did that, she was living on this tiny pension of $10,000 a year, and she was rationing her strawberries. That was her one luxury a week for food. So she was eating 3 strawberries a day, okay? Now you have somebody who, unlike my grandmother, doesn't have a summer home that she inherited and can't sell it to fund the rest of her retirement. That person is going to have to sell their house. And then where are they going to go? And so, or you could have some young family that scrimped and saved to get into Marshfield, and they're in these schools and they like the schools. And those people, those are middle class people. Those are the people who are going to be hurt the hardest from an effective tax increase, which is what this is. And so you really have to find a way to calculate all those costs before you make a decision. You just can't say I'm going to lose $300,000, $100,000, $150,000 in grants. You have to calculate the whole cost over time to the town.
And that's not a hard thing to do necessarily, is it? I
No,
mean, there are
it's not.
spreadsheet programs for that.
Do you have the spreadsheet that I sent you, the picture of the spreadsheet I sent earlier?
Do we have that spreadsheet? Did we get one? Oh, we didn't get it? Okay, well, you have one there.
I have one with some notes on it up here where I calculated a worst case
There you go,
scenario.
there you go.
Oh, there we go, for Duxbury of I calculated, I made an estimate for Duxbury of if we had, this was a worst case, 5 people move into the units with 3 kids each, and then I was able to calculate the total amount of wealth transfer per year, the amount of new taxes we would have to do, and it turned out to be huge. We had in this worst case scenario, we had if we wanted to maintain level services, we had a total tax increase of $26 million that we had to spread all among the different households in town. And you have somebody like, let's say you had, in one of them, you had somebody, it was a big increase. For some people in Duxbury who are just middle class people, they'd end up with many $1,000s of tax increases. The other problem is that a lot of people have been in their houses for decades, and so there's been this enormous asset price inflation around here. And so their homes, they're very attached to their homes, and the property taxes have gone way up because the values of their homes are so inflated. So those people, somebody who's 75 has to suddenly sell the house that they've been living in for the past 40 years.
And I know
because
in
they can't
Marshfield,
afford
they
it.
never missed the opportunity to apply the maximum potential increase,
Right.
allowable increase in terms of the overall tax
Yeah.
levy for the town,
Yeah.
which some people say is 2.5, but the actual increase in tax levy for our town especially, is also pegged to the amount of new development
Yeah.
and new growth you have. So the point that we're making here is that there are actual pretty basic programs that you can apply to get a cost to the town and to the taxpayers based on the amount of new development you have and the number of services that are required, additional students, for example, additional fire and police services. So that's not like total rocket science. It is kind of nuanced. You have to be careful how you do it, and you have to be realistic, and you should always estimate worst case scenario, right?
Right.
But why isn't that being done? And may I add, while we're just talking about increasing taxes, we're looking at a vote early next year on an assessment to Marshfield for the South Shore Vocational Technical School. They want to build a new South Shore Vocational Technical School. We're in that system now, or we're in the process of getting pulled into that system, and we have to pay our portion for the new school. You think the override for the high school was bad? Add that on now, onto the potential added costs of development in this MBTA zone. Yeah, we understand it's not going to like happen overnight, okay? But it's there and it's going to be growing, and already a major national developer has acquired a piece of property there. These are people who look for what they call economic opportunity zones, all right? They see something where they know what the potential is to expand upon the number of units and income from that property, and they're already doing it. It's already happening right now. So here's what's missing in the whole discussion. The town just put out this scare sheet, okay, and it lists all this, I think it's well actually there's only 12 on here right now. These are they call the penalties for us not being good children and doing the right thing. And they list all the different programs, and you notice 50 million for cultural facilities. We're in jeopardy of losing 50 million for cultural facilities. What do you mean 50 million for cultural facilities? What are you talking about? 8 million from Massachusetts Historical Commission, 100 million grant program to coastal communities. What they don't tell you is that a lot of these figures are over an extended period of time. I was at the advisory board meeting the other night, and I said, where is this mythology about us losing $8 or $9 million right away next year? Where's that coming from? Well, the chair of the advisory board had to, yeah, we were told that we've gotten $9 million, and that kind of money we're not going to get. Oh, but that's over 10 years. So it's like less than $1 million a year. And when you consider that our town budget is now $145 million, what's the percentage? Now, the other side of the equation is, and I want to ask Jackie about this, is what is the cost to us as taxpayers, just as Christine just zeroed in on, okay? Jackie Mason, right here, all right, she's going to get an award. Both these ladies deserve awards, I'm telling you. We need to start an awards program or something. You know, I don't know what we'll have to make up a name for it. But Jackie Mason famously wrote a letter to the town administrator. And Jackie Mason, what was the intent of that letter? How did you do it? How did you get through it? And are you happy with the response you got from Mike Maresco?
So my letter was to find out the cost of the town.
To the town?
Yep. I have done my research, and I did a different way to find out my numbers. I went back to to 09 and looked at our population increase, and that from 09 to now, to our budget now, and looked at the increases there. And there was only a change in the population, I want to say around like 1,500 people. Don't quote me on exactly how many, but around there, so not that many.
And actually the population
yes.
growth in Marshfield, there you go. Population growth is actually kind of flat right now, and the school population over the last several years has dropped by about 800, but you think the school budget has gone down?
Nope.
It's gone the exact opposite direction. The slopes are like diametrically opposed. You know, the population is sloping down and the costs are going up.
Which is funny also, because when my daughter was, say, in second grade, she had 16 students per class, and now my son in the same school, even the same teacher, to be quite honest, and his class size was 24. So it has changed even though the budget, I mean, the numbers have gone down, they're offering less already for our children. Our kids are already failing that.
So you asked a total of what? Was it 15 or how many? It's 15
that's
questions.
Right. Yep.
And you asked very basic questions. What is the budget increase to public safety? What is the total increase to the school budget? And let me just read what our town administrator wrote. The impact to the school budget would be dependent on the number of children that would be moving into our town, less the offsets from Chapter 70. But it would be safe, that's state education grants. But it would be safe to assume that more teachers would be needed, an increase in special education costs, an increase in transportation costs, and incidentally, pay attention to the budget, English as a second language is going up dramatically. Okay, an increase in transportation costs. The cost to educate a student every year is significantly more than the real estate taxes on the average single-family home. Excuse me, the question was, what is the total increase to the school budget? And that's what I got, all right?
I think they call that word salad.
Yeah, well, yeah. and that's the theme throughout this. Jackie did a masterful job of putting together, and I'm going to tell you something. In the last couple of years, we've had people in Marshfield step up like I've never seen before. You know, I go back to the days of George Shaw and Rusty Tremonti and people that were the gadflies and the muckrakers in town. And they banged their heads against the wall. Our production guy here knows the story. And they banged their heads against the wall, and it was so hard to actually nail down, and Pat Bean too, another unsung hero. But in the last couple of years, we've had people like Muriel Tussey, and I know she's going to be mad at me now because people are going to throw eggs at her house or something. But Jackie, Muriel, and so many others have done so much lately just to write the basic letters that, like, old geezers like me don't have the energy to write anymore. And they're getting fantastic results. They're exposing these people. And like I said, and along comes Christine Hill. All right, now you're in trouble, guys, out there, okay? So you're a small business person, Jackie.
Yep.
Right? You see your costs going up. You understand how it works. What makes these people think, and this is the next theme of my discussion with you guys, what makes these people think that they can snow us and frighten us like this? Where does that come from? Can you snow your customers?
No.
Why not?
And, I mean,
Because they'll
quite
fire
honestly,
your
I don't
ass.
even
They'll
want
fire
to.
your ass.
Yeah, but they would. So I wouldn't have any customers. But I mean, I think good business is better business.
Right.
I mean, so.
You would think that might apply to people in government, but you see, their pay is not at risk. All right? Their salaries go up automatically. They vote each other fat raises. You know, when our town administrator is taking home like $230 and plus a $5,000 allowance for his car and you know, dues paid for this, that, and the other thing, and then you got other family members that are on the payroll. What's to worry about? And I want Christine, if she would comment on this. You've been in a lot of different settings in a lot of different countries. What have you observed when it comes to, and since we all have to deal with the leadership wherever we go, and the leadership has got certain characteristics, tell us about your experience along those lines and how it, and what you're experiencing now here.
Okay, so first of all, I worked in the developing countries in Asia that were really moving into first world status. And so they didn't necessarily have democracies, but they had these very highly competent governments.
Were you in Malaysia?
I was in Malaysia, Singapore. I started in South Korea.
Yeah.
And I have to say that, so they had a reputation of not being democratic. But if I would ask a question, I would never get a question, I would never get an answer like this. And
I guess we're doing all right.
and so I found those governments to be much more responsible and professional than what we find in this part of Massachusetts. And if I'm going to be quite frank, it's like amateur hour, okay? We just had something for an override, a meeting for an override, where they just come, they tell you half the story, they set up this big set piece. They try to get you to go in their direction. They think everybody's stupid. And the thing is, you know, this is a part of the country and a part of the world where people are very highly educated, they're very smart, and I just am sort of flummoxed and don't really know what to make of this.
Yeah. Yep. There was not much information, but a lot of words, I guess.
Yeah.
That's to
A
sum it
lot
up.
of words. And there are some words and some statements that are okay and acceptable. But when you or I go to a meeting, like remember we had I have to tell the story remember Mike Maresco wanted to spend $3.5 million on a no-bid roofing contract, okay? And so I went to the advisory select board meeting and I said, hey, you know, I didn't say Mike, but I said, hey, you know, I think you're violating procurement laws here. What came out of his mouth? Mr. Pecevich is engaging in misinformation again. Okay? And what happened the very next day? The article got pulled. What? Gee, you think maybe some oversight agency may have maybe gotten wind of what was going on? Okay? That's what happens. And you again, I don't know if we're going to get it up on the screen, but you got to get Christine Hill. You got to access Christine Hill on Substack. But Christine Hill wrote in an article dated November 22nd, 2024, with the stroke of a pen, Healy adds additional legal penalties for towns that don't comply with 3A. That's the MBTA zoning. Okay? This is like mining the mother lode in terms of the gems that are in here. In discussing the differences between Milton and Duxbury, it was pointed out that the absurdity of Duxbury's situation. We are in an adjacent community, even though we have to drive away from Boston to get to the commuter rail station in Kingston. All of these issues are worth considering as we await the Supreme Judicial Court ruling on the Milton case. Again, Milton was really the first big town that they voted to accept the MBTA zoning at their town meeting, but a bunch of outraged residents took it upon themselves to initiate a citizen's petition calling for a referendum at the ballot box. When that happened, they overturned the vote of a town meeting. Immediately the town said, we're going to make an example of you. You know, it's like, you know, they're going to hang a sign on somebody and string them up from a light pole. They're trying to, Healy and the Attorney General are now trying to make an example of the town of Milton, and so that everybody else is going to be scared out of their wits and not want to have to face the punishment. It's like you as an individual going to town meeting and being ridiculed, okay? They want to make an example out of you. And there are also other ways that citizens suffer retribution. And most people in this town, I find, including especially parents with children, are especially sensitive to retribution because they don't know, you know, little Melissa's not going to become a cheerleader or something like that, all right? Someone's not going to make a team, or someone's not going to get a right recommendation, or maybe that little slip in their grades had something to do with it. I could tell you stories about what I went through. Specifically, Christine goes to write, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities did not complete a required small business impact study and may not have left enough time for public comment. As such, the guidelines may be thrown out because the EOHLC did not complete these steps properly, not because the guidelines are not regulations. You wouldn't know this stuff if you didn't have active citizens standing up to it. And you're not going to, I implore you to get to town meeting on Monday. And don't let them sell you this bill of goods, all right? The impacts have not been described. They have not been calculated. We know from our own basic calculations what the information that they provide us in terms of cost per pupil and budgets, that it's going to be a disaster. But you see, they're countering now. They're countering by saying, well, yeah, it's over 1,000 units potential for the area, but in actuality, there's only going to be 300 probably in the short to mid-term, and then you might have up to 600 or 700 somewhere down the road. They won't give you a date, they won't give you a timeline, none of that, and they won't give you the figures that go with it, on top of all the other financial challenges that the town of Marshfield is facing right now. Am I right or not?
Yes, you are.
You're right. Is there something I'd like to add?
Absolutely.
Your town council, who sends out emails or letters to everyone, which is so creative and unusual. One of the things he said was that Duxbury and Marshfield aren't in the same situation because Marshfield's zoning has already been approved. And the reason that Duxbury voted against complying with 3A was because our zoning was not approved by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. That's not what happened. It wasn't approved at our town meeting. The vote was just overwhelming because everybody was so angry that the state had asked us to do this, because we've tried so hard over so many years to maintain a largely residential town, and we conserve a lot of land. But the similarity between Marshfield and Duxbury and a number of other communities is the original MBTA law says that you are supposed to build this MBTA communities housing within a half a mile of a subway station, a commuter rail station, a ferry terminal, or a bus station. And neither Marshfield nor Duxbury are within a half mile of any of those four types of places. And so the question is whether we should, all the towns that are in a similar situation should join together and say that the original guidelines were incorrectly promulgated, because there's no basis in the law for requiring a town like Duxbury or Marshfield to build this housing.
And this is part of their strategy.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, our town council is saying he does not think that the way to go is to band together with other towns, because all towns are unique. Well, yeah, that's true. Like the way you described, based on Duxbury's profile,
Yeah.
and as compared to Marshfield's profile, but there are a lot of similarities. But he keeps saying, well, then we're all different. But what the common factor is our constitutional rights, among other things, and that's what we need to go by. The lawsuits against MBTA zoning are just starting to sprout. All right, it's just beginning. We've got a long way to go, but they are doubling down on us. This just came out today. I just got it on my phone. The town council, town administrator, they're using town resources to propagate this propaganda and these scare tactics and these crazy figures. They're using your tax dollars to campaign against you. Here's another new handout from the town that just appeared. It's 2 columns, yes or no votes and their consequences to town voters. Left column, what a yes vote means. The other column, what a no vote means. And if I can read it, I need my bifocals. What a no vote means. If you vote against this, immediate loss of $262,000 dredging grant and loss of $6.5 to $7.1 million pending harbor resiliency grant and immediate losses. It's totally made up, not true. Indefinite loss of ability to seek state funds under 17 grant programs. Really? Attorney General stated their intention to bring a suit to force the town to adopt the zoning. Okay? All the scare tactics. As of January 1st, 25, without a compliant, I love the use of that word, bylaw, loss of control over where district will be, and that's simply not true. Because the MBTA zoning law requires that you have a set of contiguous parcels in a block area. And there's only 2 places in town where that was deemed to be even possible. The first one, of course, is the one on Plain Street they're pushing. And the other one was down on Ocean Street, down on the east side of town, where you have all kinds of wetlands issues and floodplain issues, and it's just not going to happen. And if you think it's going to be expensive to buy out some of the properties here on Plain Street, which it will be, but there's profit potential there, try buying little tiny houses on the east side of town that start at $400,000. Try to assemble an acre of land out of those kinds of, and conglomerate a buildable MBTA area from those kinds of parcels. And it's not going to happen. The profit is not going to happen on that end. But these are the devils. This is where the devil is in the details, and this is what they want to avoid telling you about. And they want to avoid answering you direct, simple questions.
Is there one more thing I can say?
Absolutely. No, you can say 10 more things.
Okay, because the other issue here is a lot of these scare tactics are assume that the court is going to be unreasonable. Right now, it's perfectly reasonable with the Milton lawsuit before the Supreme Judicial Court for towns and municipalities to be say, hey, okay, there's some regulatory uncertainty here. We don't know what's going to happen to these guidelines. We don't know if the Attorney General is going to be able to force compliance. Let's see and wait and see what the Supreme Judicial Court decides, and then we can decide what we're going to do for our town. These threats are assuming that the court is going to say, hey, there was this lawsuit going on, and you didn't know what was going on, but you still should have obeyed what the state was telling you. And I don't know. I don't think that makes sense. Do you?
No, and you can't, and neither can you retroactively punish people.
Yeah. Can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
I had written a letter to Patrick O'Connor, our state senator, and in his response, he did say, I assume that this will be voted down at town meeting, and we will continue to fight the state on this mandate. I will be filing bills next month to strip the MBTA Communities regulation of its grant penalties and another bill to get rid of the law altogether. So that is the reason why I don't believe we should be pushing this, especially if we have representatives who are going to be trying to get this, rid of this.
You've got. I know there's one class action lawsuit that I think has had some trouble initially getting started, but it's still going on. And then you've got the Supreme Judicial Court that still hasn't come down with a ruling. So in actuality, there is really no reason for us to vote on this right now, because it's not hanging over our heads at all. It really isn't. This thing about January 1st, we're going to lose $262,000 that's already been approved. They're going to take it back from us. This is scare tactics at the maximum. And then the list, the comparison table, and the list. I mean, how much time do you think your officials are putting into developing this propaganda onslaught? They're spending a lot of time, obviously, of your tax dollars to develop all these scare tactics. This is not informing the public. This is trying to employ a bigger cudgel to make you do what they want you to do. And who benefits? Key bono, right?
Yeah. Could I just read? With the class action lawsuit, there was a gentleman in Rockport who started the class action lawsuit. It was dismissed on standing grounds, and it's currently under appeal. So they haven't made any substantive ruling on it, I don't believe. But what is interesting is that there have been citizen groups who've joined from Rowley, Malden, Wayland, Marblehead, Danvers, Gloucester, Millbury, Wakefield, Winthrop, Needham, Sudbury, Marshfield, Acton, Duxbury, Maynard, Plymouth, Hanson, Marlborough, Wenham, Drakehead, Westford, Wayland, Halifax, Hamilton, along with Manchester, Chelmsford, Belmont, North Reading, Lexington, Reading, and Ashby.
That's over 30 communities, I think. And so this is another thing you got to be very wary of at town meeting. They're going to say, oh, there are 177 MBTA potential MBTA communities, and they'll say, oh, how many are fighting it right now? It's only about 20, 30. Oh, how many have accepted it? Oh, 117. Well, again, every community is different. Some communities, the voters were probably in a different position, more willing or able to bend the knee because of the different situation. They may have 100 acres of like just blank land on the far side of town, and for them maybe it's not such a difficult decision. And some towns may already be extremely densely developed throughout. But then so the point is that this is not a one-size-fits-all solution, okay? And of course, we're talking, when I say solution, it's the solution of the need for housing, okay? And we all know that the lack of affordable housing, so-called, it's a red herring. Because what they really, and I'm gonna go a little bit esoteric, I'm gonna go off into left field a little bit, bear with me. The real problem with the cost of housing is not, okay, the number of houses or the number of apartments that you have in Massachusetts, because we know there's something like 78,000 vacant apartments in eastern Massachusetts right now. It really has to do with the whole system of finance. And so that's another whole nut to crack. And it's this right here. Keep in mind that development articles, development laws and legislation and regulations, guess who writes them? Special interests and developers. That's who writes these things. Anyway, we've tried to cram a lot in, and I haven't done a really exemplary job. You guys have been great. We've tried to cram a lot into a short period of time. But we're nearing the end of this segment of the program. Anything else you want to say in the last minute, Christine? Can you stay around, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say that I understand that people are concerned about housing, but there's a lot, like Joe was saying, there's a lot of problems with the housing market that are completely separate from this issue. It's not just the finance, it's the corporate investment in real estate that reduces the supply for people. There's a lot of investment in Airbnbs that again reduce the supply of residential housing. So we need to think about other ways to deal with this other than forcing housing down local communities.
Excellent. And with that word, I want to say good night from Control Room, but this program is now going to continue for up to another hour if you can stand it. And we're going to now take a brief break, and we'll be right back. And the first face you're going to see, you're going to be happy to see a very special guest. Okay, so for this segment of Control Room, December 11th, I'm Joe Pecevich. Thank you for tuning in and paying attention.